Picture it: a sword and a stone, a noble king, a round table, brave knights, and the magician Merlin whispering secrets of destiny. The King Arthur myth is one of the most enduring legends in Western culture. But here's the twist: most of it isn't true. Forget shining armor and chivalry. The Arthur we know is a mashup of medieval fiction, royal propaganda, and a longing for heroes in uncertain times. The real story? Far murkier, far grittier, and far more interesting. In this episode, we'll strip away centuries of fantasy to look for the truth. Was Arthur a real person? How did storytellers transform him into a legendary king? And why do we keep retelling his story century after century, even if it might never have happened? The seed of a legend: Arthur before Camelot. Before Hollywood gave us glittering castles and gallant knights, and long before Excalibur dazzled on screen, there was something far grittier at the heart of the King Arthur story. A shadowy warrior, possibly real, definitely controversial, who may have lived during the chaotic aftermath of the Roman Empire's collapse in Britain. Let's rewind to the 5th and 6th centuries. Rome had just pulled out of Britain around 410 CE, leaving behind a power vacuum. What followed was a mess: tribal infighting, waves of Saxon invaders, and a population struggling to remember the order Rome once imposed. It's here, in this muddled and dangerous world, that the seed of Arthur appears, but not in the way you'd expect. The earliest known reference to a figure resembling King Arthur doesn't come from an epic poem or ancient scroll, but from a 9th century Welsh-Latin chronicle called the Historia Britonum, attributed to Nennius. In it, Arthur isn't called a king. He's not even called a man of royal blood. Instead, he's described as a dux bellorum, a war leader, who fought 12 battles against the Saxons and won them all. 12 battles, 12 victories. That already sounds a little too perfect. And there's more. One of those battles is said to have taken place at Mount Badon, a site some historians link to a real-life conflict where Britons pushed back Saxon invaders. But the details? Sparse. We have no archaeological proof, no battlefield artifacts, and not even a consensus on where Mount Badon was. So, was there really an Arthur? Possibly, but he wouldn't have been a crown-wearing king lounging in Camelot. If he existed, he was more likely a military commander or a tribal chieftain, one of many trying to hold the line against chaos. The name Arthur itself might not even have been a name. Some theories suggest it comes from the Roman Artorius, a common name among Roman soldiers stationed in Britain. Could the Arthur of legend have been based on a Romanized Briton trained in the Roman style of warfare, clinging to the old ways while defending his homeland? We don't know. But what's clear is that this early Arthur was more grit than glory. No round table, no holy grail, just a desperate struggle for survival. From warrior to king, how medieval writers reinvented Arthur. The Arthur of early chronicles, if he existed, was a far cry from the gallant king of legend. By the 12th century, that changed thanks to Geoffrey of Monmouth. In his History of the Kings of Britain, Geoffrey reimagined Arthur as a mighty ruler who conquered Britain, Ireland, and parts of continental Europe, and even challenged Rome. Geoffrey crafted a national myth to inspire unity. His Arthur ruled from Camelot, loved Queen Guinevere, and was advised by the wizard Merlin. It was a powerful fantasy, not history. Scholars doubt Geoffrey's mysterious ancient source ever existed. Most agree that he combined folklore and fiction for political and literary effects. Still, Geoffrey's Arthur sparked a cultural wave. French poet Chrétien de Troyes added romance and chivalry, introducing Lancelot, Guinevere's affair, and the quest for the Holy Grail. Arthur's tale spread through Europe, evolving with each retelling. Chivalry reshaped Arthur as a symbol of virtue. The Round Table became a metaphor for moral equality. Camelot, first mentioned in French romances, turned into an idealized court of justice. No evidence links it to a real place. Some point to Roman Colchester, others say it's pure fiction. Medieval retellings layered the legend with jousts, curses, and tragedy. Stories of Guinevere, Mordred, Avalon, and Excalibur, sometimes pulled from stone, sometimes gifted by the Lady of the Lake, came from different sources and were merged over time. These writers weren't aiming for accuracy. They were poets and moralists using myth to inspire. Arthur became more than a man. He became a mirror of cultural ideals, not real, but resonant, and the world couldn't get enough. Romance, Reinvention, and Real Kings. Arthur in the Age of Mythmaking. By the 19th century, King Arthur was no longer just a figure of medieval romance. He had become something even bigger, a cultural icon. The medieval stories had given him shape, but it was the Victorians who draped him in velvet and marble. They needed heroes after all. The industrial age brought enormous change: factories, urban slums, the rise of the middle class, and a sense of spiritual dislocation. In that haze, the Arthurian legend offered a return to something pure, something noble, something imagined to be better than the dirty, changing world of steam engines and soot. Enter Alfred, Lord Tennyson. Tennyson, Queen Victoria's poet laureate, revived the Arthur legend for a new generation with his cycle of poems, Idylls of the King, published throughout the mid to late 1800s. He cast Arthur not just as a legendary king, but as a moral paragon, a Christ-like figure almost too perfect for the flawed world around him. Tennyson's Arthur wasn't just leading knights or fighting battles. He was leading souls, trying to uplift civilization through virtue. But here's the twist. In making Arthur a symbol of moral perfection, something changed. The messiness, the ambiguous morality of early Welsh tales, the rawness of Geoffrey of Monmouth's warrior king, all that got smoothed out. Arthur was no longer complicated or earthy. He was almost too good. The Arthur of Tennyson grieved more than he raged, forgave more than he fought, and seemed to spend more time meditating than wielding a sword. This shift made him inspiring to some, but impossibly distant to others. Still, the Victorians embraced the legend wholeheartedly. Arthurian themes popped up in art, in architecture, and even in furniture design. The pre-Raphaelite painters, like Dante Gabriel Rossetti and Edward Burne-Jones, took scenes from the legend and rendered them in lush romantic tones. Guinevere became a tragic hero, and Lancelot became a fallen angel of chivalry. The myths fed into Victorian ideals of love, loyalty, purity, and especially sacrifice. But the truth of it, the historical possibility of Arthur as a gritty post-Roman fighter, was buried beneath layers of brocade and stained glass. Fast forward to the 20th century, and Arthur took yet another leap. This time onto screens, stages, and pulp paperbacks. The legend exploded in pop culture. Hollywood, of course, couldn't resist. The 1953 film Knights of the Round Table, starring Robert Taylor and Ava Gardner, presented a bold Technicolor Camelot, dramatic and clean, with noblemen and virtuous women, all speaking with perfect English diction. Later, Richard Harris and Vanessa Redgrave brought us Camelot in 1967, a musical soaked in tragic romance and idealistic dreams. These portrayals weren't interested in history. They were about mood, about the drama of human flaws set against an impossible standard of perfection. But no film warped the legend more, while also keeping it strangely alive, than John Boorman's 1981 Excalibur. This movie was raw and operatic, soaked in mud, blood, and mysticism. Merlin wore a metal skullcap and spoke in riddles, and Arthur was caught between fate and free will. It was a bizarre film and yet oddly true to the heart of the myth, because even in its strangeness, it captured something essential, that Arthur was never one thing. He could be shaped and reshaped endlessly, a vessel for the hopes and fears of every age. Books followed the same pattern. T.H. White's The Once and Future King, published in 1958, reimagined Arthur's life as a kind of philosophical journey from innocence to disillusionment. His young Arthur, Wart, is mentored by a time-traveling Merlin who believes education can build a better world. But by the end, Arthur sees his kingdom collapse under the weight of love, betrayal, and the limits of idealism. The book is funny, tragic, and deeply humane, and while it's nowhere near historical, it touched generations of readers with its moral complexity. More recently, fantasy authors like Marion Zimmer Bradley offered feminist retellings. Her Mists of Avalon tells the story from the perspective of the women behind the throne: Morgaine, Vivian, and Guinevere. These reinterpretations pulled Arthur's world further away from male-centered warfare and toward court intrigue, religious tension, and inner life. They weren't always accurate, but they kept the myth alive by reshaping it for modern concerns. By the time we reached the 2000s, audiences had seen everything from a gritty Romanized Arthur, played by Clive Owen, to Monty Python's famously ridiculous take on the tale, complete with coconut horses and insulting Frenchmen. The pendulum swung wildly, from sacred to spoof, from epic to absurd. But one thing remained constant: People cared about Arthur, or at least what Arthur represented. That's the core of it. Every generation has made Arthur in its own image. To medieval knights, he was the ultimate warrior king. To Victorian poets, a symbol of lost moral purity. To modern filmmakers, a hero wrestling with legacy and fate. Rarely has he been presented as what he might actually have been, a local warlord, maybe with a Roman name and some clever tactics, scraping together victories in a crumbling Britain. That version doesn't fit neatly on a movie poster, but perhaps it's the most honest of all. It tells us something uncomfortable yet important, that myths often grow where history is silent. We don't just inherit legends, we build them, one layer at a time, shaped by what we need more than by what actually happened. Arthur's story has endured because we keep remaking it, and in doing so, we reveal not who he was, but who we are. In search of the real Arthur, what the ground can and can't tell us. One question haunts historians and fans alike. Was King Arthur real? After centuries of stories, films, and reinterpretations, it's natural to wonder if there was once a real man named Arthur who led the Britons against the Saxons. The short answer? Maybe. The long answer? Much more complex. Let's start with what's missing. No archaeological evidence links to Arthur. No Camelot ruins, no engraved relics, no sword matching Excalibur. There isn't even a contemporary written account from the 5th or 6th century when he supposedly lived. Early sources, like the 6th century monk Gildas, omit him entirely, despite discussing battles and British leaders. The earliest mentions of Arthur appear much later, in the 9th century Historia Britonum and 10th century Annales Cambria, both offering dramatic accounts like the Battle of Badon and Arthur's single-handed slaying of 960 men. But these were written centuries after the fact. Despite the gaps, archaeologists have explored sites tied to Arthurian lore. Cadbury Castle in Somerset, a fortified Iron Age hill fort, was expanded in the late 5th century. Local legends call it Camelot. Excavations revealed signs of elite occupation and Roman-style planning, but no definitive Arthurian connection. Tintagel in Cornwall is another candidate. Later traditions claim Arthur was born there. Archaeological finds show it was a wealthy post-Roman settlement with Mediterranean trade, indicating the presence of powerful rulers. These findings suggest Britain wasn't entirely cut off after Romans' withdrawal. Trade and wealth persisted, and strong leaders, perhaps even Arthur-like figures, emerged in the power vacuum. Yet it's likely there wasn't one Arthur, but many. A blend of local chieftains and military figures whose stories merged into legend. Geoffrey of Monmouth may have drawn from these forgotten names to craft his king. In that sense, Arthur is real not as a single man, but as a cultural echo, a composite born of hope, resistance, and memory. In oral cultures, stories carry history. Names evolve, details bend, but the essence survives. Arthur became a symbol of unity, resistance, and a better time. Even if he never walked Britain in shining armor, people needed to believe he had. And so he became a folk hero, then a literary figure, then a myth known across the world. Each generation finds new meaning in Arthur. Hope, courage, tragedy, redemption. That's his legacy. Not the sword or the crown, but the story itself. So, was King Arthur real? Not in the way the movies tell it. There was no round table, no enchanted sword handed out by water deities, no golden age of Camelot. But that doesn't mean there was nothing behind the myth. Somewhere in the wreckage of post-Roman Britain, there may have been a warrior, or many, who fought for their people and inspired centuries of stories. And maybe that's enough. How would you like to get a deeper understanding of history, impress your friends, and predict the future more accurately based on past events? If this sounds like something you might be into, then check out the brand new Captivating History Book Club by clicking the first link in the description. To learn more about medieval England, check out our book, Medieval England, a captivating guide to English history in the Middle Ages, including events such as the Norman Conquest, Black Death, and 100 Years' War. It's available as an ebook, paperback, and audiobook. If you found the video captivating, please hit the like button and subscribe for more videos like this.